Good evening, everyone. My name is Monica Gross, Master Food Preserver, and welcome to Preserving Tomatoes, Part 1, Canning Sauces and Jams. We are the UC Master Food Preserver online program. I'd like to mention that we have attendees from all over the United States. We had 111 folks sign up, and we have people here from Kentucky, Iowa, Missouri, Texas, Kansas, Illinois, New York, Indiana, and Oregon. So welcome. We also have one person internationally, and that is someone from Zimbabwe. So welcome everyone to this class. Okay. It's not advancing. Okay. All right, I'm going to start again here. Oh dear. Well, as I said, my name is Monica Gross. We have a Q&A monitor named Jennifer Allen, and we have three wonderful panelists, Rachel Jones, Patricia Hazen, and Tanya McManus. So I want to remind you about a few things regarding Zoom. So please keep your mics muted when you're not speaking. And when we invite live questions, please unmute and speak up or raise your Zoom hand. Now, at any time, you can submit questions or comments in writing to the Zoom question and answer. Open this from the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see that Q&A, go on your menu bar to More, and then a menu box will pop up and you will see the Q&A from there. And again, during the open session, please just speak up. So who are we? The UC Master Preserver online program. It's a community outreach. It's online based. It's grant funded. It's a volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. And it provides up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. So to keep Californians and the general public safe and well, as we practice culturally appropriate research-based practices and to safely preserve food in the home, we reduce food waste, increase food security, and we provide engaging ways for Californians and the general public to explore healthy food. So I won't read you all of this fine print, but we want you to know that we're all volunteers. And we do not speak for the University of California, and we do not endorse or oppose any specific organization, service, or product. So for example, if you see a specific kind of equipment shown tonight, it's not that we endorse that particular product. So tonight's program is we have wonderful speakers, and they're going to share with you 3 different ways to preserve tomatoes. Rachel and Patricia are presenting savory recipes. The third speaker, Tanya, will present a sweet recipe using powdered pectin. You will see the water bath canning method for 2 of the recipes and pressure canning for 1 of those recipes. You don't need to take any notes because you will receive the PowerPoint slide deck if you fill out the short survey at the end of the presentation. So relax and enjoy the presentation. Without further ado, I would like to present Rachel Jones, who will be presenting preserving tomato sauce in a water bath canner.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Jones. I'm a recently certified master food preserver in Contra Costa County. I'm going to take you through unseasoned tomato sauce. So you might have noticed that tomato season is in full force right now. Maybe you have your own garden that's overflowing. Maybe you know someone who has tomatoes that they're getting rid of. Maybe you're seeing the beautiful tomatoes at the farmer's market. And the great thing about canning is it lets us harness the flavor of these tomatoes really when they're at their best, so we can enjoy those peak summer tomatoes all throughout the year. So this unseasoned tomato sauce recipe is a really great flexible way to use those. Think about how often you reach for that can of tomato sauce in your cabinet for starting so many recipes. This is a way to elevate that and just replace it with the best quality option. So let's dive in on how to make it. Now, before we do anything, we want to make sure that we are working with a tested and reputable recipe. We would love to just use like grandma's recipe or find anything off of Google, but in order to reduce risk, really eliminate the risk of botulism and make this as safe as possible, we want to make sure that we're using recipes that have actually been scientifically tested and are guaranteed safe. So I'm working with this resource, So Easy to Preserve. It's a great tested book, and the recipe will be shared out with you in the class worksheet that we're sharing once you complete the survey. So now we can dive into the process. First thing you want to do is clean and disinfect your workspace. You want to clean all of the crumbs and things off and use a disinfectant to start destroying the germs that are there. Once we have a clean space, we can start gathering our tools and ingredients. So you can see some of them here. So ones that I want to call out. First is our canning pot. So we don't actually need a pot that's specified for canning. We can use any pot that's big enough to fit our jars and get 1 to 2 inches of water above our jars. We'll also need a rack, a wire rack to put at the bottom of our pot. So that'll keep our jars from making direct contact with the pot. So we can avoid thermal shock, which could make the jars crack. And this also lets us get that even water circulation around the jars so we can get that heat to penetrate all the way through and kill anything that could cause spoilage. Some other things that we have in the front, we have our jar lifter. So this allows you to safely lift those jars out of the hot water. And next to that, we have our headspace tool. This measures the distance from the top of our sauce to the lid of our jar, which is really crucial to the canning process. And we'll talk more when we get to that step. Then we have our ingredients in the back. This is a really simple recipe that really lets the tomatoes shine. So we have our tomatoes. You want to make sure you're using ripe, high quality, freshly picked tomatoes. Then we will also need acid to add to this. Because tomatoes are borderline acidic, we need to add acid to them to get them to a safe pH so that we can use the boiling water canner and it's safe to just store on the shelf for months and months. And finally, we'll need salt. And this is just for flavor, so that's optional. So once we have all these things together, then we can dive into the process. So it's really important that we wash our jars and our lids. It's not necessary to sterilize them since the processing time is longer than 10 minutes. That's long enough that we don't need to sterilize in advance. We can just wash them in warm soapy water. Then we'll put the lids out to just air dry. And then we will put the jars into our canner and start getting that water warm. At this point, we don't want the water boiling, but we want it just to get hot. Up to 180 degrees is the ideal temperature for this. Yeah, that will make sure that we don't get thermal shock when we're adding that hot tomato sauce into these jars. So once those are cleaned and ready to go, then it's time to prep our tomatoes. So we want to remove the stems. We want to cut off any bruised or damaged or just gross looking portions to make sure, yeah, we're putting the best possible stuff into our sauce. And then we'll actually start cooking. So for preparing this sauce, there's kind of an easier way and a harder way to do this. The harder way is if you want to avoid your sauce separating, then you'll start by quartering about a pound of your tomatoes and you'll bring that to a boil. Then as you maintain that boil, you're going to keep slowly adding quartered tomatoes in. Then once you've added all your tomatoes, you'll simmer that for an additional 5 minutes. If you don't care about separation in your sauce, then you can just add all of the tomato quarters at once and get those up to a boil and then simmer for 5 minutes. So you'll end up with this really chunky looking sauce. So in our next step, we are going to separate that out. So we'll strain that. You can use either a food mill, which we have on the upper level, or you can use a fine mesh strainer as well, which is pictured below. So for this recipe, we are going to discard all of that pulp and the peels. But yeah, later in this class, we'll see a recipe where you can save those peels. And if you join part 2 of our tomato series, then you'll find some really cool ways to use those peels. So we will take the juice that we have now, add that back onto the stove and reduce that down. You can really reduce this up to your preferred thickness. One trick that I like when I'm reducing things, you can use a chopstick and at the beginning of cooking, dip it in and mark that level. Then you can use that to track how much your sauce has reduced as you go along. So when we are just about done with that simmering, then we'll want to add the acid and salt to our jars. For this, you can use either bottled lemon juice or you can use citric acid. So for lemon juice, it's really important that you use bottled and not fresh, because fresh lemon juice, it doesn't have a uniform acidity. Like I have a Meyer lemon tree in my yard. It would be great to just go grab a few of those, but they're actually less acidic compared to other lemons. So using bottled lemon juice, this just guarantees that you are getting to that acid level that will make this safe for shelf storage. Or yeah, you can use citric acid. So the ratio that we're going to do, we're using pint jars for this recipe. So you would add either a 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid or 1 tablespoon of lemon juice to each pint jar. And you would add 1/2 teaspoon of salt to each pint jar for flavor. Once we have the acid, then we'll add in our tomato sauce. So for this, you can use a funnel to limit the amount of mess. And this is where our headspace tool comes in. So we want a 1/4 inch of space between our sauce and the top of the jar. The headspace tool has those markings. And the reason why this is so important is if we have too much headspace in there, then during the processing time, we're not going to get all the oxygen pushed out of the jar. And then we're not going to get that vacuum seal that's going to make it safe to stay on the shelf. If you have too little headspace, then you'll get sauce leaking out of the jar, and that can also prevent the vacuum seal from happening correctly. So once that's measured out, you want to wipe the rim because any sauce remnants on there could also prevent a good seal. Once it's clean, you want to tighten your ring to fingertip tightness. If it's too loose, the lid could fall off and we'll have sauce in our canning pot. If it's too tight, it's not going to let that air escape properly to create that seal. So we want it just at fingertip tightness. Once they're all filled, we will add them back into the warm water, making sure there's 1 to 2 inches of water above the jars. Since this is a longer processing time, it would be better to stick to 2 inches since that's going to kind of boil off and evaporate. So heat the water to a boil. Once we reach that boil, that's when we're going to start the timer for our processing time. For me, I am at sea level, so processing time for me for pint jars was 35 minutes, but you'll need to adjust your time for altitude. And water boils at different temperatures at different altitudes, so to account for that difference in temperature, you'll need to boil and process for a longer time. So there's a chart that has the altitude adjustments in the recipe that we will share. So during this processing time, you'll want to maintain what we call a smooth jazz boil throughout the process. You don't want a vigorous boil where the jars are like bumping around and knocking against each other. That could, spill some liquid that could fail with the seal, or it could crack the jars once they're bouncing together. So once you reach the end of that processing time, you'll turn off the heat, you'll take off your lid, and you'll let the jars just settle for about 5 minutes. At the end of that time, then we can take them out of the pot. So you'll use that jar lifter, you want to make sure you're lifting straight up and straight over, not jostling, because then we can get, yeah, that liquid spill that could interfere with the seal. Once you take them out, you want to make sure that you're not putting them directly on your counter. You can use a rack or a towel just to, yeah, keep that layer between so we're not getting thermal shock. Then you'll wait 12 to 24 hours to let those cool and seal. You can check the seal by pressing on the top and making sure you're not getting that at a pushback. If it hasn't sealed, you can put them into the freezer or you can use them immediately. If they did seal, then you'll want to label them with what's in there, what date you did this process, and what kind of process you used. And then you'll store these in a cool, dark place. You can store them really, yeah, for a few years, but you'll get the best quality if you use it within 1 year. Yeah, so that's the process. So I used my tomato sauce that I can to make enchilada sauce, but there are a lot of great ways that you can use it. Again, it's really flexible for being the base of recipes. So you can use spices to take it in a lot of different directions. You could use Indian spices and make a chicken tikka masala. You could use more Mexican spices and make a slow cooked taco meat. You could use it as the base of soups and stews. Again, really anytime you would be reaching for that store-bought can of sauce, this is a great thing to use instead. Okay, so now we have a little time for questions.
So thank you, Rachel. And I'm now going to ask Jennifer to take over the question and answer to see what we've got.
I think actually we should defer the questions for right now and keep moving with Trish. And then we can answer some questions after Trish's presentation.
All right.
Okay.
So I'd like to introduce Trish, who will be preserving seasoned tomato sauce using a pressure canner instead of the water bath canner.
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Trish, and we'll move on into seasoned tomato sauce using a pressure canner. Why am I using a pressure canner? Because I could do a boiled water canning. So I'm using a pressure canner because research shows us that some foods will do better, have a better quality, better consistency when you actually use a pressure canner. I also got a pressure canner and I wanted to use it. So I was like, I'm going to use it. And so that's why I'm doing it as well. So you want to review using your pressure canner because they are different. And so make sure you read through your information book, right? Like, can't see it so much on here. Anyway, so you can also review the pressure canning basics. There's a QR code there on the upper right, and I also included the website address there. You will get these when you complete the survey. They'll be emailed out to you. So if it's your first time canning, then I advise that you read the recommendations, the guide, and the QR code is down to the lower right. All right, so please be sure to complete that after class survey and you will receive our class notes with recipes. Next slide, please. All right, here's just a sampling of things that you'll be receiving. And so canning checklist, pressure canning at altitude, all those types of things. All right, next slide. All right, so here for seasoned tomato sauce, one, you want to use a reputable research-based recipe. Why do you want to use a research-based recipe? We want to make sure that you don't get botulism or that you don't give your canned goods away and your friends get botulism. So we want to make sure that we're preserving things in an adequate way, and that's why we recommend a research-based recipe. Well, how can I get that? Well, you can go to our website, which is listed here, and the QR code, which is also, if you can go up one, which is right there. And on that site, you're going to find a whole list of places where you can go and you can find research-based recipes. All right, next slide. So what I chose to use is a book, So Easy to Preserve. And there is the recipe ingredients. You'll get the recipe also by completing the survey. Next slide. All right, so before you do this, though, you need to prepare your tomatoes. So you need to wash them, you need to peel them, core them, and then chop them. So I'm taking my clean tomatoes, I'm putting them in boiling water. This is called blanching, and I'm putting them in there for about 30 to 60 seconds. And when I see that they've split, you can kind of see a little bit in the picture there that they split. That's when I'm going to submerge them into an ice water bath. That gives them a good shock. And then the peels are so easy to come off. So as you see there in that photo. Over and the one on the lower picture, I tested out what happens if I do it for less time? What happens if I do it for more time? The more time that you boil them, the thicker the peel will be, and also the easier it is to peel. But the one that's on the right was the one that was in the cooker boiling the longest. It just doesn't look as nice as the other ones. But anyway, all right. So the very right-hand side, you see our peels in the upper left. You're going to save those peels. You can put them in a bag and you can freeze them because in our next class, where you're going to learn how to dry them and do different things with them, particularly tomato paste, which I love. And then I have my cores, I have my onions, my garlic, and my chopped tomatoes. Next slide. All right, and so to prepare the jars, you don't need to sterilize jars. They're going to be in the pressure canner for 15 minutes, so we don't need to sterilize anything that's going to be greater than 10 minutes in processing. So you're going to put the rack, you can see the rack in the bottom, and you're going to put the rack in 2 to 3 inches of water, and you're going to heat that water with the jars in there to 180 for a hot pack. This is so when you have the jars, you're not putting really hot stuff into a cold jar because it could crack. So this is warming up the jars. Okay, next slide. And then we're going to be cooking. So putting all the tomatoes and all the ingredients together, and we stew that and cook it and simmer it for 2 hours. And then we're going to put it through a food mill. That food mill that's in the next picture there is going to remove the seeds, and you can just discard the seeds. You want to prepare your bottles, taking them out of that warm water. Here you can see I'm putting in 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. If you don't want to use lemon juice, you can also use citric acid, and you would use 1/4 teaspoon of citric acid. So you put that in each jar to provide that acidity so that those bugs that may be in there, they don't thrive in acidic environments. That's why we add acidity. All right, and then you will ladle it into your jars. And then you see that we're using a headspace device, and it has markings on there of how much headspace that you're going to be using. In this case, it's 1/2 inch. And then I'm wiping the jars. Well, why do you need to wipe the jars? Well, maybe I got some tomato sauce on there. So if I didn't wipe the jars, then if I put the lid on, that could interfere with the seal, and I don't want that, right? And so if you also have anything with high fat content, you want to use vinegar on that. Some people also say if it's high sugar content, you can use some vinegar because it gets really sticky and hard, but definitely for fat content. All right, and then you center your lid on, place your ring on, and tighten it to finger tight. And then you will pick up the jars and drop them down. You do not tilt them because you don't want to interfere with that potential seal that's going to be happening. And then you're placing them in the canner. Okay, next slide. All right, step 4, the jars are in the canner. You're going to secure the lid. Make sure you read the directions of your canner, making sure that you're doing it the appropriate way. If you have an All-American, which I do, it's very, very specific in how you're going to place that canner lid on. So you're going to secure it and you're going to leave the weight off. So when I'm talking about the weight, otherwise known as a pressure regulator, that's what this one is. So I can change the pressure that will be in the canner. You're going to leave that off and you're going to turn the temperature on to high heat. Why do you leave the pressure regulator off? We want to evacuate all the air from that pressure canner. Research shows us that if we don't vent, this is called venting, if we don't vent the pressure canner a full 10 minutes, we trap air in there and that air can cause differences in temperatures. So once you have a funnel of steam, consistent steam, you're going to start your timer for 10 minutes. You're going to vent for 10 minutes, and then you're going to put on your pressure regulator. Okay, next slide. And this particular one has different markings on it and different holes that I would just put it onto the vent port of the canner. So then I'm going to bring the pressure canner to pressure listed in the recipe. So I'm at sea level, excuse me, not sea level, but I'm less than 1,000 feet elevation. And so I'm going to bring mine to 11 pounds of pressure, which you can see right there. And this is a video. Make sure you read your owner's manual on your pressure cooker because they are different. Normally, we're used to like a kind of sound. And an All-American, we want it to sputter. That's what they use, the word sputter, 1 to 4 times a minute. So here's a video.
Trish, I don't think it's going to play the video. So just
Okay, no problem. Next slide. That's just fine. All right. So once you have the appropriate jiggle, rock, sputter, whatever you want to call it, then you're going to start your timer for the appropriate amount of time listed in your research-based recipe. So in my case, it was 15 minutes. So, and you want to make sure that you maintain that adequate sputter, jiggle, rock, whatever you want to call it, throughout the time. If at all that stops, then you need to restart your reprocessing all over again. You bring it up to the adequate pressure, and then you will reprocess starting from minute 1. All right. So your 15 minutes is up. Ding. The timer is off, and you turn off the heat. If you can safely move your canner off of the heat, then that's great. Mine is really heavy, so I just move it from the burner that was there that's still hot. I move it to the side. All right. Next slide. And so we're going to wait until the pressure drops to 0. We don't want anything like coming off at full pressure, right? So the gauge that you have on this pressure canner is here to tell me when the pressure is down to 0. That means it's safe to remove the pressure regulator. Then once the pressure regulator is taken off, I can safely remove the lid. In my case, my lid was stuck and I could not get it off. And so you can use a screwdriver to get it off. And they do mention how to do that in the manual. You're going to lift that lid away from you. You don't want a full amount of steam in your face, so you want to lift it away from you. And you will also wait 10 minutes. I'm sorry, when you take that lid off and before you open it up, you'll just let it be. It's down to normal pressure of 0. Just let the cans be. And you're going to let them sit for 10 minutes. Then you're going to lift that lid off. I'm sorry about that. Next slide. And you don't want to tilt them at all because you don't want anything interfering with that seal. So when you put this seal, when you put the jars down, I put them down on a tea towel. You can also put them down on a cooling rack, like what you would put cookies on. And you leave them there for 12 to 24 hours. As tempted as you may be, that you want to screw down those rings and make them really tight, do not resist that. Okay. Resist the urge. Do not do that because that adequate seal is there and you want it to buckle on down to that jar. As well, if you are tempted to dampen off the liquid that's formed on the top of that lid, do not touch your jars. Okay, just let them be. Let them be and let them cool. So after the 12 to 24 hours, you can check and see if they are adequately sealed. If one is not sealed adequately, what can you do with it? You can reprocess it within 24 hours, or you can freeze it. Or you could stick it in the refrigerator. If you're going to freeze it, which these jars you can freeze, you're going to make a headspace of 1.5 inches because when you freeze things, they expand. So make sure you take out enough. So in this case, it was 1.5 inches. All right, so you label your jars and you can store them, eat them within 1 year for the best quality. They're still safe after that, but the best quality within 1 year. And next slide, the uses. So I love marinara sauce. And so you can add some tomato paste, you can add some basil. If you want to put vegetables in your marinara sauce, go for it. Celery, more onions, any carrot, whatever it is that you want. And just taste as you go. You can also reduce it to have it as thick as you want. Great for pasta sauce. I like particularly baked ziti. If you reduce it enough, you can use it as a base for pizza. Dipping sauce. Who doesn't love mozzarella sticks dipped or breadsticks in a really, really nice sauce? You can use it in soups and stools, excuse me, you can tell I'm a nurse now. Soups and stews, and then dishes. So like lasagna, parmesan, things like that. Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Patricia. Now, Jennifer, do we have some questions that we want to address?
There are no open questions in the chat currently, but if anyone has some, please feel free to put them in. We do have a few minutes. Oh, there we go. Don't the jars pop? Somebody asked.
Sorry, put myself on mute. So yes, they do. So you'll hear like a click, like a popping sound, and that is when the seal is, as the things cool, when things expand, when things get heated up, they expand. When they are cooling down, cooling down, cooling down, that lid is sinking in and it'll make a pop. And the way you're going to test your seals after 12 to 24 hours is you're going to push down. You can also use a spoon and knock it as well. And they should be, or you can look at them and they'll be a little bit concave.
Someone asks, doesn't adding lemon juice affect the flavor?
Um, Not, it can affect it. I found that the sugar that was in this recipe affected the flavor more. I don't mind the lemon, and you really, I didn't affect it for me and my taste. You could also use a citric acid, so it's not a lot. It's a quarter of a teaspoon in each jar for citric acid, and I don't find that changes it either. And some people are wondering, well, why is it bottled? Like, if it's, how do you know what the percentage is? I think it's the USDA says it must be 5% acidity for bottled lemon juice to be sold in the United States. So
We have time for just a couple more questions. When sterilizing, is that just soap and water or do we use vinegar?
So maybe people mean prepping versus sterilizing. So with cleaning them, you can either clean them in your dishwasher, you can clean them in your sink with hot soapy water. Sterilizing is when I'm only going to process, let's say for 5 minutes, then I'm going to put the jars in water and letting that boil. And then that's going to sterilize those jars and then bring them down to fill them. If
And
that
then
doesn't answer your question, then please let us know.
I think one last question before we continue on. How long can you safely wait to eat the sauce? I think they mean like how long can you keep it stored for?
So theoretically, you could keep it stored for a really long time. If you're waiting for like the zombie apocalypse or something like that, you can eat it for a really long time. Just the quality will degrade over time. Otherwise, if you're asking about when can you safely eat the food or when can you eat the food, immediately you can eat it.
Okay, there was clarification about the sterilization. I think they were talking about the work area, which I know Rachel had addressed at the very beginning.
Rachel, you want to talk about that?
Yep, yeah, it's necessary to clean off your work area. And we do have kind of differentiation between cleaning and disinfecting. So cleaning is just kind of getting all the surface level stuff out of there. And then, yeah, with the sanitizing step, then you're using a sanitizing agent that's actually able to destroy the microbes there. Yeah, we don't need to get far beyond that to actually, yeah, the disinfect level is enough cleansing. We don't need to go full to like sanitize. Yeah, just disinfecting, using a disinfectant to kill the germs, that's sufficient for this process.
Perfect, thank you. I'm gonna hold the rest of the questions so we can continue to.
Okay, so our third presenter is Tanya, and she is going to talk about spiced tomato jam. So this is a sweet product with powdered pectin and processing it in a water bath canner. So Tanya.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tanya McManus, and as Monica mentioned, I'll be teaching how to make spiced tomato jam with powdered pectin. The jam is unique and one of my family's and friends' favorite jams. Step 1 is gathering the equipment. After prepping your work area, always gather the equipment needed before you start canning. This will save time and not interrupt the cooking phase. Rachel did a great job listing the canning equipment needed. Step 2, begin by preparing 2.5 pounds of tomatoes per the recipe for following the instructions. Patricia mentioned in the first part of her program about how to prep the tomatoes, blanch, and peel. Once the tomatoes are peeled, chop them and place into a pot and simmer for 10 minutes. Remove the tomatoes and measure 3 cups for the jam and place this back into the empty pot. I like smooth jam, so I usually take an immersion blender to the tomatoes for a minute. Don't forget to refrigerate the tomato skins and leftovers, tomato puree, as the other participants mentioned in Tomato 2, we'll be talking about how to use those tomato skins. Okay, step 3, sterilize the jar. This recipe requires sterilized jars. Any recipe with less than 10 minutes of processing time in a boiling water canner or a water bath canner needs to be used sterile jars to ensure pathogens are destroyed prior to filling the jar with jam. Once the jars are sterilized, I turn off the heat and leave them in the water so they will be hot and ready when I add the hot jam. As mentioned before, do not put packed food in cold jars. It will crack them from thermal shock. And as Rachel mentioned, you don't have to have a fancy canning pot. This is my stainless steel pot, and I have a footed rack that I put in the bottom of the pot and use a lid when I'm sterilizing and processing jam. This pot is about 9 inches in depth, as is the pot I use to cook my jam. Deep pots allow 1 to 2 inches of water over the half-pint jars for sterilizing and processing. Deep pots, when cooking your jam, will prevent boil over onto your stove, and this will save hours of cleanup. Step 4 is to gather all of the ingredients and measure per recipe. Note, we are using bottled lemon juice in the recipe. Bottled lemon juice has 5% acidity per USDA regulation and is needed for the gelling process. The fresh lemon is used for the rind zest, and at this point in the recipe, it calls for the spices and lemon zest to be added to the cooked tomatoes and mix well. Next slide. Okay, step 5 is where the science of jam making takes place. This step begins at the molecular level where a chemical reaction takes place with the pectin, the acid, which is the lemon juice, sugar, and heat. Pectin is made up of long single strands of molecules that cannot be joined together until acid, the lemon juice, is added, which neutralizes and allows the pectin strands to bond to each other to start the gelling process. When sugar is added to the pectin and acid, the sugar binds water and allows the pectin strands to become even tighter and closer together, creating a tighter gel network. When you add the heat or the temperature to the mix, it causes the water to evaporate, concentrating the sugar and creating an even tighter gel network, which is jam. Remember, to be successful when making jam, ingredients must be added in at the right time, the right amount, and in the right order. If not, your jam will not gel. In the first picture, I have already added the spices, the lemon zest, the lemon juice, and I'm stirring in the pectin. You can see this little paste at the lower end of the picture. That's the pectin getting stirred in. Once you've added that, you bring it to a boil over high heat, stirring constantly. And once you've achieved a nice soft boil, add the sugar all at once and mix well. At this point, you can add a 1/4 teaspoon butter or margarine to the mixture right after the sugar is added. The butter reduces the tension of the juice, thereby reducing the foam created during the rolling boil. Once the sugar and butter are added, stir constantly until you reach a full rolling boil that cannot be stirred down. You can see what this looks like in the second picture. Once a rolling boil is achieved, boil hard for 1 minute, stirring constantly. You will want to preset a timer for this. Once you have boiled the jam for the full minute, you can turn off the heat. Here are a few tips for successful jam making. Powdered pectin is not interchangeable with liquid pectin. Use what the recipe calls for. Don't be tempted to double the recipe. You can't determine the safe processing times for a double batch. Don't decrease the sugar as it acts as a preservative and gelling agent. If you want to make low sugar jams, there are tested low sugar recipes on the Master Food Preserver website. Use the jar size called for in the recipe or a smaller size, never a larger size. Next slide. Step 6. You are now ready to bottle the jam, but first remove any remaining foam on top of the jam with a spoon. A stainless steel spoon works the best. The foam does not hurt the jam, but it does detract from the appearance. With a ladle, fill jars with a 1/4 inch headspace. Each jar's headspace should be measured. And once the jars are full, wipe the top with a damp paper towel and place lids and rings in place and screw the ring on finger tight. Remember to prepare your lids and rings per manufacturer recommendations. Place the bottled jam on a towel until ready for processing. Next slide. All of us have discussed the importance of measuring headspace on each jar. Here's a close-up of the measuring tool for the headspace, and it actually shows the measurements: a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and an inch. Headspace is important for the sealing and safety of the jam. Too much headspace creates too much oxygen in the jar, which could allow pathogens, yeast, and molds to grow during storage. Too little headspace can cause the jam to boil up during processing and cause food particles under the seal, which will then cause seal failure. Next slide. Step 7, you are ready to process your jam. Make sure the rings are on finger tight, and using the jar lifter, lift each jar straight up, straight over, and straight down into the boiling water canner. Make sure you have 1 inch of water over the jars. 1 inch of water is sufficient for this recipe because we are only processing for 5 minutes. Turn the heat up until the water reaches a vigorous boil, not too slow or too fast. Start the timer for 5 minutes. Place the lid over the pot, and once the timer goes off, turn off the heat, remove the lid, and wait 5 minutes before removing jars. This probably will feel like the longest 5 minutes ever. Next slide. Step 8, the processing is complete, so you can remove the jars straight up, over, and down, and place on a towel. Do not place on the counter. As mentioned, you want to avoid thermal shock. You don't want the hot jar touching the cool counter. And the hot jar could also damage your counter, and you don't want that either. Notice the water on the lids. Leave it alone. Don't be tempted to wipe it off. It will air dry. Listen for the ping of the jar sealing. That's a great sound for food preservers. Let jars set for 12 to 24 hours. Then you can remove rings, check for seal, and clean outside of jars and lids to remove any residue. Label and store in a cool, dark place. As mentioned before, quality is best in the first year, but as long as the seal is intact, you can eat older jam. Next slide. And there you have the process to make tomato jam. There's always a little left at the bottom of the jam pot, so I use this on toast as a quality taste test. Other uses include warming some jam in the microwave and pouring over softened cream cheese and crackers for a snack or appetizers. Or I have warmed the jam and used as a glaze on meatloaf or on grilled chicken, pork, or fish. Any questions?
We don't have any open questions, but we have time for one if anybody wants to drop anything in the chat. Sorry, in the Q&A. Do we store jars with rings on or off?
Off.
Well, I think you could, if you wanted to, you could leave them on. Just depends with you.
Yeah.
So you can store them with the rings on, but you don't have to. So I like having rings on because then when I open it, the ring is already there. I don't have to go looking for it.
So I'll tell you a story what happened to me. I stored
Mhm.
some canned items with rings on, and at some point the seal failed, and I
Mhm.
didn't know it until I took the ring off. So I like to store them without the rings, and I always keep a couple of rings in my silverware drawer in case I need to put one on.
Yeah, and for people who want to keep the rings on, once you've passed the 12 to 24 hours, you can remove the rings and you can wash your jars. You should be able to pick up your jars just by the lid that's sucked onto that, right? That's sealed onto that. And you can wash them. And then you can put just the ring back on and then store it that way. That was a good
Somebody
question.
is also asking, is it okay to use green tomatoes in the recipe?
So
The
there are
test
probably, oh, I'm sorry, because
that
that's
is for
yours. I'm thinking of mine.
are they
Sorry.
asking for the jam? Okay, so I could not find a tested recipe for green tomatoes. I looked.
Can somebody speak to the difference between electric and stove-based pressure canners? I think by electric, they're referring to an Instapot.
So an Instapot is a cooker, not a canner.
So there is a company, and I can't remember what it is, but I was reading about it, where it is an electric pressure canner. That's what they're calling it. We haven't done any for us, as far as I know, we haven't done research that's on that to ensure that. And so what we recommend is using a pressure canner. So pressure canners will usually have a gauge on it so that you can tell when it's down to zero. It's not like my mom's old pressure canner that just had that was actually a pressure cooker, excuse me. So it's a pressure canner. I can use my pressure canner as a pressure cooker, but a pressure cooker is not necessarily adequate as a pressure canner. And pressure canners usually can accommodate a minimum of 4 quarts. So that's pretty big ones, pretty big jars. And I think it was like 6 pints or something like that.
Somebody is asking, is it safe to make jam without canning it? I would not want to can something that my family won't eat. I will just add that you will absolutely eat the tomato jam. It's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted.
And
But
the
then
whole
Tanya,
idea
you
about
can add.
processing the jam, years ago when we used to use wax seals on jam, we didn't process. But research has shown that the processing kills any pathogens in that jar. And it's just a safety issue. So you really, this recipe makes 5 half pints, so it's not a really big recipe. And if your family won't eat it, you can always give it away as gifts. I do every year. I have a list of people who insist that this is the jam. They don't want any of my other jams. They want the tomato jam.
Yes, it is really, really great recipe. I made it myself, and it's like Christmas in a jar. It is wonderful. So when I was young, we had tomato jam, and I was like, tomato jam, but then you try it, and it's really good. This is even better. It's a fabulous recipe.
Another question slash statement. I canned 5 quarts of tomatoes today in the water bath canner. I don't think I packed enough into the jars, and I have 2 inches of liquid at the bottom, and the tomatoes are all floating on the top. Is this safe, or should I just start over?
So there's reason that things can float, and one thing is like you don't have enough in there. So you don't want to cram things really, really, really in there so that they don't float, because you're also going to bust your tomatoes. And so you can get some fruit float. You want to make sure that you follow the recipe. And for everybody, when you're following a recipe, don't alter the recipe, right? If there's a little bit of spice you want to alter, that's fine, but don't alter the ingredients and the ratios, because that's very important to the canning and the densities of them and heat penetration. So I have to think about that, and if we can get that person's email and we can respond back to them, because right off the cuff, I'm blanking out. Maybe somebody else has that.
Somebody else said, this is not a question on the uses of putting tomato jam on on meatloaf sounds so good, and because they don't like ketchup. I think that's a great use for tomato jam. I think anywhere that you would use ketchup, you can definitely replace it with that. If a jar doesn't seal properly and needs to be reprocessed, does it need to be reopened, the contents reheated, and then topped with a new lid? Or does it just go directly into the boiling water and processed for the required time without replacing the lid?
Recommend freezing rather than reprocessing. It's easier, first of all, and sometimes when you reprocess, then you are kind of degrading the ingredients when you're like adding heat for that much longer. So yeah, we'd say it's better to just stick it in the freezer at this point. And I think Trish mentioned also when you are putting it in the freezer, it's important that you actually adjust the headspace. So you'll need more headspace with a jar that's going in the freezer, since this stuff is gonna expand when it goes in. But yeah, we would recommend freezing over reprocessing.
If you are reprocessing, you want to do it within 24 hours. You want to use a new lid, because what was it that caused it not to seal appropriately? Do you have a nick on the canning jar that could cause it not to? Did you get food stuck in between the lid and the jar and it didn't seal? Did you have too little of a head space where stuff is flowing out and over into you look at your water and you'll see stuff there? So you want, if you're going to recan it, if you're going to reprocess it, you want to inspect the jar, seal that sealed area, make sure there's no nicks in there. You can wipe it, clean it off. You're going to use a new canning lid to put it on there, and then a ring to tighten that down. So I hope what else was in the question that the person had? Did I hit all the points?
Yeah, I think
Jennifer?
you hit it, Trish,
Okay.
and we should continue on, I believe. Yeah. 7:58.
Okay. Okay, we need to move through to the end. We have a couple slides here. We want to let you know that there are other events that you might be interested in. The QR code here will lead you to the Master Food Preserver page, which I looked at it today. It had 30 events on it, and they could be anywhere in California. So we are the group that is online. So our events will be on there, and other events from Master Food Preservers in counties where they have in-person classes, you might find those. So if they're local to you, of course, you're welcome to attend one of these. So the next 3 events for the online food preservers is, the first one is Preserving Tomatoes Part 2, Dehydration, Freezing, and Pickling. So that'll be 2 weeks from tonight with the same group of ladies that presented tonight. On September 3rd, the night after September 2nd, there is a monthly Ask a Master Food Preserver class. So you can pop into a class with any kind of question and ask it at that time. And then thirdly, the last class here is called Meals in a Jar. Open, heat, and eat. So it's how to make some kind of soups or meals in a jar. Okay, we have a monthly newsletter you can sign up for at this site. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and you can follow us there. And if you are interested in becoming a master food preserver, this is the link that you want to click, and you can find out about it there. And lastly, when you depart this Zoom class, a survey is going to pop up on your browser. Please complete it to help us improve, and we'll send you this slide deck, which includes all the handouts and the recipes and the tips. So thank you so much for all your time and interest. Happy preserving.